What's up, guys? This is EJ Holland with the Wolverine.com, and we are back with another Wednesday Q&A show. Sorry, I've been gone for basically an entire month. I've been obviously traveling around, getting out to spring practices, seeing some of Michigan's top overall targets. It's been quite the adventure navigating weather the last few weeks, but we are back, and we'll have our weekly shows every Tuesday. We'll also have some official visit preview shows every week that me and Ethan McDowell will pre-record and have up here on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't yet, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos, and also subscribe to the Wolverine.com today. Use the promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at the Wolverine.com. Get exclusive insider information on everything Michigan recruiting, the team, transfer portal, basketball, and so much more. Again, all over at the Wolverine.com. Use that promo code UM1, $1 for 2 months. Also a great message board community over on the Fort. And we will start answering questions in the order in which they came. If you want to skip the line, we already have quite a few questions in the chat box, but if you want to skip the line, you can leave a super chat. That allows you to jump the line. It goes directly to my travel budget so I can continue to see top guys around the country. And yeah, we can get started in the order in which they came, unless you guys want to leave a super chat. Again, that's the little dollar sign that goes boost you up the line. Sorry, I'm kind of out of it today. I was up at 4 a.m. seeing Michigan's new cornerback target, Chase Geetert. I just woke up from a nap, and we also don't have a producer today. But since I've been gone for so long, I definitely wanted to make the show happen. So we won't really have the profiles popping up or anything like that. I'll just be straight up answering the questions for as long as I can. We usually go 30 minutes, obviously, so we'll see if we get to that time limit. But let's go ahead and talk about, I guess the merger. Yeah, it's been a long time. It's been a minute since I've been up here. Ben Ricketts says, since the merger of On3 and Rivals, will you and Ethan be going over to Rivals? I thought I read that Rivals will cover recruiting and On3 will have more team details. Yeah. Here's basically what I can share about the merger. I was at 24/7 covering Texas when they merged with Scout, and obviously that all worked itself out. Scout eventually, fizzled out, and it all stayed under the 24/7 umbrella. This appears to be a little different because they are keeping the Rivals branding and the Rivals name for recruiting and high school purposes. Whereas they didn't really do that with Scout. It just kind of fizzled out. But the team sites themselves kind of, merged and became one. Now, the plan right now is for there to be two different Michigan sites. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work in the interim, but long term, I think it'll work itself out. In terms of, will I be at Rivals? No, I will be exclusively at the Wolverine. Nothing is going to change at the Wolverine.com. The only thing that's going to change is the national branding. So you'll see, I think like Pete Nakos, for example, or Andy Staples, like they do more college football portal. Like they'll stay under the On3 national branding, which will be more college football and transfer portal driven. Whereas guys like Steve Wiltfong, Chad Simmons, who focus more on the recruiting aspect, they'll be under the Rivals branding. But you don't have to get a subscription to Rivals. You can just keep your subscription to the Wolverine.com. You'll get all of my recruiting content there. It'll be the same staff. And even though guys like Steve Wiltfong and Chad Simmons will be under the Rivals branding, they will still be posting on our site. So again, nothing really changes on the team site. I know it's a little confusing right now since they're keeping the Rivals branding and it's not exactly like the 24/7 Scout merger, but I think everything will work out. And like I said, the Michigan market having two sites, I think that'll work itself out a little later on. I would say moving parts, as I like to say, but I think that, again, nothing's going to change with the Wolverine.com. I have a long-term deal. I'm going to be there for at least another couple of years. So nothing's going to change with me. But that's probably the best explanation I can give. Ryan says, any worry that there's not a wider net being cast for running back options? Tennessee can easily still get Hyder, which leaves Latimer as the only viable option left. Tony Alford did send out a couple of running back offers. He offered Ryan Estrada out in Texas, who is an On3 prospect. He has a pretty loaded official visit schedule left. They have an offer out to Case and Baker in Georgia. He also has a pretty loaded official visit schedule, but is also another On3 prospect. I think, if for whatever reason they miss on Savion Hyder and or Amari Latimer, you'll see the board open up even more. Obviously, at that point, you'll have no options left. But I think the focus is fully on landing Savion Hyder. The rest of the board will work itself out. I do think they want 2 backs this cycle, and they'll take 2 backs. But again, right now, I think they're of the mindset of let's get Savion Hyder and figure everything else out later. So a couple of new offers there. But again, I don't think you'll see the board expand really unless they miss on Savion Hyder. And, that's arguably the biggest recruitment of the cycle right now. Michelle Wallace says, you said we need some linebackers. Do you see any that Michigan is gaining favor for? So thank you, Michelle Wallace, for the $4.99 super chat, getting to skip the line. I think Brian Jean Mary has gotten some negative pub here in the past cycle, but he's putting in a lot of effort, man. You have to give credit where credit's due. Like, he's been trying very hard, and that's commendable. He was out on the road as soon as the self-imposed contact ban came to an end. Like Sunday, that first day, he was on a plane to Baltimore and had dinner with Nick Abrams and his family. And I think Michigan's in a good spot for Nick Abrams. They're in the Final Four there with Alabama, Georgia, Oregon. I had a chance to go out and meet with Nick Abrams a couple weeks ago or last week. It's all kind of blending in right now with as much traveling as we've done. But I had a really good conversation with Nick. Yeah, his father is a CEO of I believe it's a financial planning firm. They're really, really high on academics, Michigan's business school. Nick himself goes to McDonough, which is a great private school in the DMV that offers elite academics as well. So I think that does play a role, maybe not at the same extent as like a guy like Carter Meadows, but I think it does give Michigan a built-in advantage there. I think Nick, traditionally pre-NIL era, would fit Michigan so well. He kind of has that Michigan kid personality background, just makes a lot of sense for Michigan. Now we are in the NIL era, so Michigan is going to have to step up from a business standpoint as well. With schools like Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, you're going to have to. And I think Nick's a tremendous talent. He's right at the top of the linebacker board. Braden Rouse down in Georgia is another, prospect that Michigan has gotten back in the picture with after, offering. There wasn't a lot of movement. Then they got him on campus. They locked him in for an OV. I think Tennessee's going to be tough to beat there. But, definitely in the mix. They're still working on Shadarius Tootle, who's committed to Auburn and is coming in this weekend, even though Georgia's built some buzz. Guys, I think that they can really land that are in that 4-star range are DQ Forkpa out of IMG Academy. Michigan's in his top 3 with Colorado and Florida. Kenneth Goodwin out in California. Brian Jean Mary visited him this past week. Michigan's in that top 4. I think it's really Michigan or Georgia there. So, yeah, those are some linebackers that come top of mind right now that Michigan's definitely in the mix with. So I think Jean Mary, properly caught some flack early on, but he's really turned up his recruiting efforts, which is definitely a positive. Let's go to Ben Ricketts. He says, Michigan has lost many recruiting staffers this offseason. When do you anticipate that they will bring in replacements? They have brought in some replacements already. Most of those guys work behind the scenes though, so you don't really hear a ton about them. And I think your next comment is, it sounds like Avery Bean has been a hit since joining the staff. Have you heard of any other recruiting staffers that have been a net positive? Anybody that's like in the recruiting department in those analyst roles, those are very, very entry level positions. I think and what I mean analyst roles, I mean they're working directly under Sam Popper as recruiting analysts, but I think team analysts like Josh Synagoga have been doing a great job and have a little bit more involvement with the recruits. These guys that are recruiting staffers, the contacts probably a little bit more limited. Some of them seem to be a little more involved than the others, but I think the actual football analysts like Eric Campbell has done a great job with the receivers. Juan Castillo is not really a recruiting guy, but he really, really moved the needle with prospects at practices. They were extremely impressed with just his coaching ability, and he has the resume to sell as well. So some of those guys are the ones that I think are really moving the needle more with recruits. Let's go down to our new super chat from Sean O'Hara. And he says, anything new with the Carter Meadows recruitment? I still like Michigan going into official visits. I think Carter wants to go through official visit season. I think there was a rumor that Carter was going to decide, earlier this month or something. The plan has always been from the Meadows family to simply go through OVs. He has his Final Four set. I think Carter is likely to end up in the Big Ten. Obviously, 3 of his finalists are there with Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, South Carolina being the only school that's not. I think when you look at the finalists, Penn State's a school that he's been familiar with. Ohio State had a really strong offseason visit. South Carolina, Sterling Lucas does a phenomenal job there. He was the one that pulled Nick Harbor, 5-star from the DMV, Dylan Stewart, another 5-star from the DMV. So they have the background of landing 5-star edge type guys from the DMV. I guess Harbor was a receiver. He should have been an edge. But I think all those schools have a good chance with Carter as well. But I think Michigan just checks a lot of boxes for him. And I don't think there's going to be really anything new with Carter until he completes his official visit tour. But I think Michigan, offers that high-level academics, which he gets at Gonzaga. His parents are more academics than they are really football fans, so they really care about what Michigan can offer off the field as well. And I think that, on the football side, Carter likes the development. He likes the defensive scheme. The family likes Wink Martindale and what he's, brought to Michigan and his NFL experience as well. So I still think Michigan's trending in the right direction going into OVs. The Bull will win. $4.99 super chat. Appreciate everybody sending super chats tonight as we get back into the swing of things. He says, what are some top defensive linemen that Michigan has a legit shot at, preferably DTs? On the defensive line board, so non-edge guys, they are in the final group for Titan Davis. I think he's, a big priority, obviously very highly touted in the top 150. I think USC and Alabama probably have some momentum going into official visit season, but Michigan gets him last, which is definitely a positive. Damari Simeon out of New Jersey, Michigan's in his top 4. A little bit of work to do, but Lou Esposito's put in a lot of effort into that recruitment. We just haven't talked a lot about Damari Simeon because he's kind of like a ghost, man. Doesn't do a lot of interviews, isn't really popular on social media, I guess. So, but Damari Simeon's definitely a priority. He's coming in for an OV. And, those are 2 more highly touted guys. You have Ben Boulware out in North Carolina. Ethan was seeing him today. I think Michigan needs a true nose type. Boulware's that guy. He's, a true 300-pounder. He's coming in for an OV. And unless that's changed, Ethan should have some intel up over at thewolverine.com. But he's high on the board. I think 2 guys that are not as highly touted in the rankings that Michigan's really prioritizing is Tyson Bacon, former Tennessee commit. He was in this spring. We expect him in for an OV, just hasn't locked in a date completely. and Alistair Vallejo out of Liberty Hill, Texas. He is kind of a late riser, got a Michigan offer this spring. Notre Dame followed that up with an offer. SMU's trying to keep him home, but he's, like I said, another kid that's high on the board. So those are some of the defensive linemen that come to the top of my head that are more, either nose, three technique types. Let's see. Customer service says, compare Jaden Davis and Brady Smeaggel. You guys are always bringing up Jaden Davis, man. And then Ryder Lyons chances. So we'll go Ryder Lyons first. I think are very low. He still hasn't locked in an OV. He probably stays out west, whether it's Oregon, which is looking like the team to beat right now, or USC or BYU. But I don't think he ends up at Michigan. Compare Jaden Davis and Brady Smeaggel. Similarities are they are both guys that were ranked too high early on. They are both guys that peaked physically early on. They're both guys that operate well within their high school system. The system is built for them to put up big numbers. So they both put up gaudy statistics at the high school level. Both of them have the ability to be accurate short to intermediate. Both of them can command an offense and are high IQ football players. Jaden Davis got some of the best training possible. It was mentored by Cam Newton. Brady Smeagol's father is his head coach at his high school. So those are some of the positives or some of the similarities that they both share. Not all of those were positives, but some of the similarities they share. Some of the differences are, I think Smeaggel has a better throwing motion. He doesn't do the, wind up. I saw a clip of Jaden Davis like last week, and that windup is still very noticeable, or hitch, whatever you want to call it. It's like I don't even know how to do it. But Brady Smeagel's release is more compact. His motion's more compact. He's also taller. The big thing with Jaden Davis, or one of the knocks I had on Jaden Davis, is he was a short quarterback, a sub 6'1" quarterback who couldn't really run. And Brady Smeagel is not the greatest athlete in the world, but he's definitely taller, in that 6'4" range. So I think that helps him out a little bit more. I would say Smeaggel has a bit better of a deep ball, maybe a little bit better arm strength, but not a guy that's going to be, an elite arm talent in the same way that Jaden Davis wasn't an elite arm talent. So I think much like Jaden Davis, obviously I projected him as a guy that would be, more of a backup guy that could control the game like Cade McNamara and potentially be a starter later on. Same thing with Brady Smeaggel, except I think Smeaggel has a little bit of a higher, a higher floor, in the sense that he's a taller guy. He's a little bit more athletic. He's also older for his grade, which isn't a positive by any means, but I think he's coming in physically ready and a little bit more mature. He'll be a 20-year-old freshman. I believe he's older than Bryce Underwood. So he'll be a 20-year-old freshman in season. But yeah, I think similar trajectory. He comes in, he's a backup for Bryce Underwood, a very capable backup, which is needed in a quarterback room that doesn't have a lot of capable arms. And he will be a guy that, you can rely on if something happens to Bryce, and potentially be a bridge guy for whoever they land in 2027. So that's kind of how I would say. No, I'm not saying Smeaggel stinks. Also, it's important to keep in mind that I'm arguing against where Brady Smeaggel is ranked, right? So, and yeah, you're right, Adam Brashear. So Bryce is still 17. I don't think he turns 18 till August. So Brady Smeaggel is older than Bryce, right? Yeah, Brady Smeaggel is older than Bryce, because Smeaggel would be 19 this season. Bryce will be 18. But no, I'm not saying Brady Smeaggel stinks. I'm trying to argue against his ranking, right? Like, there are worse quarterbacks out there that you could get than Brady Smeaggel. I think he was probably one of the better options you could get after landing a Bryce Underwood, especially, at a place like Michigan where you can't really sell a wide open offense. But what I'm doing is I'm arguing against the 90 ranking, right? Like that's his industry ranking. He's not a top 100 guy. He's not a top 150 guy. He's not even a top 200 guy, in my opinion. So I'm arguing against that. And it was kind of the same thing with Jaden Davis. I'm trying to set the stage for what you should expect, not what the rankings say, because the rankings for both Smeaggel and Jaden Davis are largely based on what they were projected to become as younger kids, and they've kind of peaked out. So we're not getting that expectation when it comes to that rankings. That's kind of what I'm saying with that. So yeah. In terms of, let's go back to the top and talk about. Sorry, my cat's meowing in the background. In terms of, sorry about that. Okay, customer service. He says, wanted to give Tyson a chance. What are the chances we get both 5-star edges? Also, rate our chances with Hyder. What do you think Hyder's NIL value is? Both 5-star edges, I'm assuming you're referring to Carter Meadows and Trenton Henderson. I would say it's likely that they get one, and that would be Meadows. But, they've done a really good job with Henderson. I went out to Pensacola to see him. He has Michigan in his top group. If the Wolverines play some NIL there, could definitely get interesting. I don't think he's a 5-star on On3, but I do know that 24/7 recently made him a 5-star. He's really, really good. He's kind of in the same body type of a Derek Moore or Nate Marshall. And normally I like taller, longer guys like Carter Meadows, but he like Derek Moore, he's just really, really good. I have him graded higher than I did Derek Moore. It took me a little while to get around to Derek Moore. Like early on with Derek Moore, I was kind of, up and down, didn't know what he would be. Michigan was actually changing defensive coordinators at the time, going from Don Brown to Mike McDonald. So by the end of the cycle, I had Derek Moore ranked in the top 100, but closer to like 100. With Trenton Henderson, I think he's a legit, borderline 5-star for sure. Rating the chances with Savion Hyder, I still think Michigan has a good chance with Savion Hyder as long as they talk NIL numbers this summer. That's the biggest storyline. They haven't talked guaranteed numbers. They've given baselines, estimate, things of that nature, but they haven't talked hard numbers. They have to do that when Hyder gets on campus. In terms of what I think his NIL value is, yeah, man. I mean, I think it's going to be around $1 million or more. I think he's going to set that running back market. He's the number one running back in the country. He's a 5-star for a reason. I think Savion's a special talent. So we'll see if Michigan gets going there on the NIL side. I think I skipped somebody here. Ryan had a question here. What's the plan at linebacker? Oh, mostly because we answered that kind of in the super chat. He says, what's the plan at linebacker? It seems like an odd use of resources to visit Atkinson when Georgia, Ohio State have a big lead. Is Gene Murray just swinging for the fences with him and Tootle and then go to other options? No, I mean, he was already there, though. Like, they're recruiting Anthony Davis out of Grayson. They are recruiting Braden Rouse, who's also in Georgia. So I think he kind of just stopped by. I think Atkinson was a stop by, and let's see if, anything can shake maybe later in the cycle if they get, a big donor that wants to spend on like an Atkinson or something, just keeping the relationship going, which is fine. Like I said, he was there visiting other targets. He wasn't there just for Atkinson. And him and Tootle would be guys that he would love to land. But I mean, Nick Abrams, like I said, is high up there. Braden Rouse is really high up there. They're in good spots with DQ Forkba and Kenneth Goodwin. So, those are some of the linebackers they're moving the needle with. Customer service says, put a percentage on these prospects: Ojo, Gray, Turntine, Delaney, Scruggs, Lee, Obot, Calicut, Barnes, Tootle, and Krempin. Jesus, I don't know, man. I would just say, I'm not going to put exact percentages. Just we're going to briefly go through this. With Ojo, I think, again, depends on business talks, but right now I would say medium to low. Gray, I would say low. Turntine, I would say medium to high if they do business talks. Delaney would be high. Scruggs would be medium to high. Lee would be high. Obot would be medium to high. Calicut would be probably just medium. I think it's going to be tough to beat Texas, but Michigan's, that school that can do it. Barnes, I'm not sure what Barnes he's referring to. Tootle, he would probably be low right now. I think Georgia's in a better spot to flip him. Krempin would probably be medium. I still think distance is kind of a factor there. Let's see. Customer service says percentages for Elely, Keys, Bronaugh. I mean, all of these guys are kind of like, well, Bronaugh is like a newer offer. Keys is going to require a huge NIL deal. Same with Eley. So I would say low all of them. We'll see where things happen with, what happens with Bronaugh here. Customer service says, when is Michigan going to start talking NIL numbers with recruits? I mean, the expectation can be that it starts this summer, but guess we'll see. Tyson Smith says, will we get Meadows? Right now, I will say yes. Tyson Smith says, is Turntine still coming this weekend? So John Turntine was scheduled to come in this weekend. He is not coming in this weekend. He's visiting Stanford. He will, however, be here on June 13th, which is better. I'd rather have him later in the summer than this weekend. So June 13th is when Turntine is coming in. Tyson Smith says, who do you like more, Brady Smeaggel or Jaden Davis? Obviously, we just had a huge discussion about that, but I would lean Brady Smeaggel over Jaden Davis, just, being taller, being a little bit more athletic, having a slightly better arm. Tyson Smith says, what's the first CD you've ever owned? The first CD I ever owned was probably Country Grammar by Nelly when I was an elementary school student. I didn't really start collecting CDs till I was like 10 or 11. I had Word of Mouth by Ludacris, Lord Willin' by Clips, College Dropout by Kanye, Godson by Nas. All of those had really cool little actual CDs. David says, is Michigan still interested in Jake Cruel, even though they didn't get an OV? I think that ship has sailed. David says, which quarterbacks in 2027 do you think deserve to be a 5-star? It's a good question. On3 didn't rank any quarterbacks a 5-star in 2027. I think the guys, as far as Michigan's board, guys that I would put in that 5-star range would probably be Kavian Bryant, just a dynamic dual threat quarterback out of Texas. And then Peter Bork out of New England. It was really, really impressive when I saw him over the weekend. Burke says, EJ, why did you move from Chicago to Virginia? Won't it be harder to cover many Michigan targets, especially in the Midwest? I moved to Virginia because my wife is getting her PhD out here. So that's the reason I moved here. It was not willingly. But no, I mean, it's actually been easier to cover Michigan. You think about the targets right now. Look, who's a big target in the Midwest right now? CJ Sadler, Mikhail Blade, Titan Davis, I guess, if you want to count St. Louis. Nobody else. Who's a big target out here? Carter Meadows, Nick Abrams, Savion Hyder, like Travis Johnson. It's actually been easier to cover Michigan out here. It's a weak year in the Midwest. I think next year will be a strong year in the Midwest. Obviously you have a ton of in-state talent, and that's why we hired Ethan McDowell, who'll be assisting with our recruiting coverage, and he'll be living in Chicago and traveling to the state of Michigan frequently. And he's actually moving to Chicago this weekend. Let's go down to, I think we're basically done with everybody. Let's go down to rapid fire and answer these remaining questions. Adam Brashear says, who's the top quarterback Michigan is after in the 27 class? Chip Lindsey's casting a pretty wide net, but like I said earlier, I would say Kavian Bryant, Peter Bork, Keegan Croucher is another one that's very high on the board. Croucher had a really impressive weekend as well, winning quarterback MVP at Under Armour, New Jersey. And then Michelle Wallace says, have you had any more problems with parents? If so, I could be your bodyguard. No, I think the parents have kind of calmed down since we had that. Like, I still think it was a fake, you know, fake outrage with the Gregory Patrick thing. That was ridiculous. But no, I feel like the parents have been pretty calm. I don't know. Maybe after tonight's show, I'll get some calls from Smeaggel and Davis. But anyway, appreciate you guys for joining us tonight. Sorry we didn't have a producer, so it was kind of just me sitting in front of the camera and talking. But we will be back next week with our usual show. We will have another show this week that previews official visits going into the weekend. And as always, you can subscribe to thewolverine.com. Use that promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at thewolverine.com. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free.